Welcome to the iProve webinar on creating the building blocks for a user-centric digital identity. I'm your panel host, the head of Digital Identity Technologies Department at Cybernetica, Michael Buckland. As one of the key architects of eStonia, we have developed some of the core technologies that drive one of the most digitally advanced countries, and it's exciting to see the current developments around the world in digital identity. It is with great pleasure that I have been asked here today to moderate this panel discussion. Our panelists are no strangers to these topics either, and we are privileged today to be joined by Marie Ostena, Head of Digital Identity at Visa, Campbell Cowie, Head of Policy at iProve, and Riho Kerg, EID Architect at the Estonia Information Authority. Some general housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will answer them throughout the webinar or at the end. So please put them in the chat. If we don't manage to get to your question, someone from iProve will reach out to you. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please reach out to Alexis Gontier at iprove.com and he'll be able to assist. Today's session will also be recorded. Now, let's set the scene. Many countries are currently embarking on their digital transformation journeys. Others are faced with the task of reconciling existing legacy systems and processes to prepare them for the future. Across the private and public sector, there is much disruption and exciting opportunities to evolve how services are delivered in a landscape of changing technologies. The regulations, the perceptions of trust, data protection, privacy, it's all there. Digital identity may be a new consideration for many sectors, and creating and deploying solutions that resonate with the end user is a key focus. Trust in these systems, demonstration of the value proposition to end users, delivering a meaningful, secure, easy to use digital identity, along with the frameworks to support them, are all key building blocks in providing a positive outcome for stakeholders. It's with this in mind we have brought together our panel today to discuss these topics through the prism of creating the building blocks for a user-centric digital identity. But before we dive into what is sure to be a robust discussion, let's find out more about our panel and do some introductions. Welcome, panelists. Starting with Marie, can you please give our viewers a brief background on your experience in the wonderful world of digital identity?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, Michael. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Marie Ostena. I'm heading up digital identity at Visa here in Europe. My focus is very much on bringing payments and identity services together. How can payment benefit from the identity services now being built up around Europe? Very much active in the IDAS pilots and in other market initiatives. Worked in the space since 2014, in fact, starting with the mobile operator. So been around for some time and seeing how it's evolving. So yeah, looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Marie. Very interesting indeed. Our next panelist is an old friend, also working on EID topics in Estonia, Riho Kerg. Riho, can you tell us a bit about your journey into EID?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, and you are right, Mike. We are old friends. We have been both employed by the same company and doing contact in different fields. So I'm very appreciated that you be asked here. So right now I'm employed as an EID architect for the Estonian government, and one of my most important project currently is to how to implement the eIDAS wallet in an ecosystem that is currently working very well. So there is quite the challenges to put together the old and working and the new and exciting technologies. So it's again very nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive with the wallets, but I'm sure we will get a lot deeper into that as we go through the discussion today. We are also joined by Campbell Cowie from iProve. Campbell, what brought you into the exciting topic of digital identity? I know I think about it all the time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'm Campbell Cowie. I am head of policy at iProve. My journey into EID and digital identity really started 30 years ago, and when I was sort of tasked with looking at regulatory challenges as we transitioned from sort of analog media into digital media. And it was clear from very, very early stage that the trust layer was missing, and that trust was a significant impediment to take up engagement with and participation in the digital economy. And so a lot of the work that I've done over that sort of 30 years is looking at regulatory solutions to that absence of trust. And I joined iProve sort of 2 years ago now, very much with a view to building out support and understanding of the role that ID plays and digital identity plays in providing that trust in the digital economy. So that's my background in relevance to this.
Brilliant, and I would put money on it that trust will be a recurring topic today in this discussion. Definitely a big ticket item. So now that we have met our panelists, let's dive into today's topic, creating the building blocks for a user-centric digital identity. Marie, what do you see as the foundational principles that identity practitioners need to consider for a user-centric digital identity program?
Yeah, no, sure. It's a good question. So of course, at the core, we have trust, like you mentioned as well in the introduction. But I look at this program as being a very much a cross-ecosystem initiative to align the stakeholders, align the participants, the consumers, the government, private sector around a few, core topics. And I think one of the interesting examples of this kind of program is what the European Commission is trying to do within the IDAS. But it's all about making sure that the consumers find the identity services relevant. They have somewhere that they can actually use it. They know how to trust it and why they can trust it. How is the personal information being used? Is it secure? Is it privacy protecting? Having a great user experience as well. So it's all about the consumer, consumers being one important stakeholder, an important component of such a program, or one of the foundational principles, as I'm saying, of such a program is how can we protect, enable, and encourage adoption for consumers. But there's a flip side as well. There's another side to this, is the certainty for relying parties. Does an identity give the legal equivalence? What about liability? How can I trust it? Under what circumstances? That's another big important topic. Foundation principles. Technological interoperability, absolutely essential, so we don't get silos, but that we get the necessary, use across industries as well, so that it is an identity system that becomes federated, let alone cross-border. And again, a very exciting topic, I think. And then it's the role of the government. I think that is key for the government to decide, are they going to be a demanding customer, demanding relying party? Are they going to set out, and how are they going to set out the trust framework, the rules, the regulations in the market, ensuring the legal equivalence that I mentioned? And how are they going to make sure that all the stakeholders and the participants in the ecosystem will know what to adhere to, and that they will adhere to the rules? What type of monitoring services, control mechanisms, and so forth? And what role will the government take? Will there be an active provider of the wallet itself? Will they let the private sector innovate, compete under, and limit themselves to certification and defining the trust framework? I think these are all interesting questions, I think, and I'm sure that we're going to dig into many of them as the conversation continues. But yeah, these building blocks for this user-centric identity program, it needs to take into account the different stakeholders, and it needs for the government as well to decide on what kind of role do they want to have and how do they ensure the legal equivalence, technical interoperability, protection for the consumers, security, privacy. It's quite a big job, actually.
Yes, I quite agree. I've noticed in my travels around and speaking to different governments and visiting different countries, just how much those trust perceptions change as well. You know, like you have very high trust perception of government in one place, or you know, private sector in another, and yeah. Campbell, you mentioned before your background in trust. Do you have something to add here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of what I would want to put in is sort of builds on what Marie has said. I mean, I think we have to begin by sort of understanding what those building blocks are of trust. So we have to start by being clear, I think, on what inclusion and accessibility means. You know, what do we actually mean when we talk about that? Because these are the key building blocks of trust from the consumer perspective. So consumers have to be able to use sort of inexpensive devices. So there shouldn't be a requirement that you have to use the latest, most expensive sort of smartphone. The user experience, as Marie says, must be simple. So no requirements for sort of complex facial contortions or the very annoying narrowly specified camera angles when capturing images. Sort of compliance with accessibility standards such as WCAG. You know, these things should all be minima requirements. I think critically consumers have to be offered a choice for enrollment with biometrics clearly offered as an opt-in. It should not be an opt-out, it should be very much opt-in with choice being the basis of the experience. I think providers have to shoulder responsibility for resilient security. And I think that's increasingly going to be important as we move into a world where the threat environment is going to be ever more complex and ever more fast moving. I think solution providers have to take ownership of that. And so critically for me, this isn't about balance or about trading these different components off against one another. As solution providers, we must satisfy all of those requirements in full if we're going to provide services that are trusted. And I think, you know, and I also to go back into my old world of thinking about things in the context of that wider, broader digital economy. And I come at this very much with a view that a successful delivery of accessible and inclusive solutions reduces obstacles to participation and the benefits of the digital economy. And that's really what we're about.
Yeah, absolutely. Rio, I know being an Estonian and having had access to these systems for some time, do you think that there is a shift in these foundational building blocks as we move from, you know, EIDAS into EIDAS 2, from how we've done things in Estonia to the wallet approach?
Yes, indeed. The change is actually quite big in many levels. So first, for last 10 years or past decade, there has been the emerging concept of the wallet, because before that it was just a passbook in a phone without any standards, and something that already was mentioned by Marie, the interconnectivity just was not possible. Right now, the wallet is already emerging as a universal mean of the digital identity for the management, and it is underpinned by the standardized digital document representations that are called attestation, the whole new world of the new words. So the evolution is guided by the development of the ISO standards that are also quite new. We like for the MDL 18035, for the W3C guidelines for the verification, verifiable presentations, and the OpenID protocol stacks for the issuance and presentation. So this is a really evolving world, and wallets are really becoming the fabric of the digital identity, which is very different of how it used to be in Estonia. So there is a whole paradigm shift happening in Estonia, but I'm not concentrating on that. but all this aforementioned tectonic shift for the wallet-based digital identity has a very special technical complexities and very new ones. On the one hand, we have what Campbell already mentioned related to the remote onboarding, the topics with biometrics, identity proofing, deep fakes, additional attributes, so on and so forth. Lots of exciting things happening there. But on the other hand, we have the wallet with different topics. We have key management that is very close to the Mike's heart, probably.
Yes, absolutely.
Secure storage. Secure storage, again, attribute attestation, the verification. There is like all these, the trust mechanism, all these components are complicated topics by itself. So we are living in the time of a unique set of challenges, and they need to be navigated so that the security and the integrity of the digital identities are actually working together, not only within eIDAS framework in EU, but also across the borders, outside of the borders to other countries, because this is we will see how this is going to happen, and you are right, Mike. We are in very exciting times.
Absolutely, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more with the regional considerations. You know, we know that cross-border reciprocation was at the heart of the wallet in the EU. I'm quite looking forward to see how this rolls out. You know, region to region. You know, there's already things happening between the US, Australia, the EU around MDL and reciprocation. It's quite an exciting time indeed. Campbell, what's currently happening in the identity landscape that you see that is, you know, impacting how identity practitioners can build that inclusive and accessible digital identity program?
I mean, thanks, Michael. I mean, I'll focus, if I may, on the sort of the policy aspects of that, because that's sort of my comfort zone, as it were. And again, I go back to the position that I referred to earlier about the importance of participation in this wonderful digital economy. Participation is an enabler of digital transformation in public and commercial services, and what's really driving the policy framework. We've heard already about eIDAS, and you've talked about MDLs with particular relevance to the US. But I mean, what's really driving these is the governments exploring ways in which they can expand access to public services and also find efficiencies in the delivery of those public services. To your experiences in Estonia are a good case in point. Singapore is another one. Two countries that have fully embraced that digital transformation agenda and are now reaping the rewards from it. Other countries are looking on enviously and trying to copy, mimic, and I think to understand what those national governments have done. But it's also important I think to recognise that commercial services are also seeking their own forms of digital transformation. They're looking to reach consumers through new digital channels and offer improved consumer experiences. Many of them delivered through innovative digital means, and often involving now identity and AI. Good example is the Eurostar solution that's in operation at St Pancras International in London, that uses the smart check biometric onboarding and check-in, and that saves passengers that have gone through the often lengthy queues at passport controls. But the success of these transformations and the new services is critically dependent on the services being accessible and built on inclusivity. They've got to be easy to access, easy to use, particularly by the most vulnerable in society, and that's really important for government services. And participation in those services again is on the basis of trusted identity. So again, we still come back to that concept of the role of trust as a driver of participation. And I mean, what we're seeing is a sort of a wave of it's industrial policy now taking place across major markets. And in those industrial policy moves, we're seeing accessibility and inclusion and as a user-centric approach to identity very much at the core. This has been done through a mix of regulation, but also policy support for innovation and sponsorship of voluntary industry moves to build common approaches to identity verification schemes. Rio and Marie have mentioned sort of the IDAS and the digital wallet, so I won't go into that myself anymore. But it's also worth talking, the UK and Australia, for example, are countries that have adopted a different approach. They're looking much more at playing a sort of facilitative role in bringing together industry to form sort of voluntary models for digital identity based upon best practices. And then the government then sees its role as legislating to provide a sort of a trusted governance structure around those industry provided standards on good practices. But you've also got other models as well. The US doesn't have specific legislation, but they've adopted an approach whereby sort of government agencies, notably Homeland Security and NIST, are creating competition for innovation funding and also running testing of solutions to try and sort of encourage that sort of commercial competitiveness over which solution providers rise to the top. But the EU is also, pump priming innovation. It's not the US isn't the only one doing this. Maria and Rio mentioned the digital wallet program. The EU is pump priming at the moment 4 large-scale pilots for digital wallets, under which 360 private companies and governments are collaborating in the building, testing and trialling of wallets under several use cases. Commission's has recently announced an additional 20 million euros for further pilots. That's on top of the 46 million already allocated. These are sort of horizontal identity initiatives in policy environment and policy landscape, but there's also vertical moves as well. For example, proposals for enhanced know your customer rules for financial services, and for age assurance and identity verification for regulated online platforms under frameworks in the EU, but also in other national authorities, including Australia and the UK. And then we're also seeing focus on the development of technical standards through international groups such as ETSI and CEN, looking to provide a sort of consistent and interoperable approach to many of the technical aspects of digital identity, including security, but also accessibility and inclusion. So there's a marrying together of a range of different approaches, but very much at the core of each of those approaches is the concept of the user and the user being central to the delivery of the service.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Very interesting. Marie, we have a question for you in the question and answer box. We'll get to the questions at the end, but that one was directed at Marie. But Marie, I have another question, which is, how can digital identity programs create value and societal benefit by enabling seamless, secure access to core services such as healthcare and financial services?
Yes, of course. And those, I think those are, we see already with existing identity schemes, we do see the benefits to healthcare as well as financial services. I think the very much the starting point, of course, is just ease of access, no more passwords. That's applicable to anything. Really, the strong user authentication requirement with the EU ID wallet, as well as with how the existing bank IDs and digital IDs are being used to access such services. But I think we can go much, much further with that. Leaving aside a little bit the interoperability question, that when we start talking about interoperability within an industry and then across borders, we have, challenge. With payments, we kind of have a good idea how to do it. With healthcare across borders, that's going to be fun, right? But I think in terms of just giving the examples of what I can do with my health app and combined with my digital identity, such as order prescriptions, just send a request to my doctor to get that prescription fulfilled, and then I can go and pick it up at the pharmacy. and I prove who I am with my identity. Look, no visits to the doctor, not much challenge at the pharmacy either. Getting the doctor's appointment at the time that suits me. I don't need to call anyone. Getting a referral to an expert as well. All that these, typical actions that used to take lots of paper and lots of emails and time and scanning and everything else can be done digitally. So I think that kind of that ease of interaction, because you have a trusted connection or trusted link between the doctor, the healthcare provider, and the consumer and the other participants within that ecosystem, like the pharmacy, like the specialist. I think that's that's going to hopefully make healthcare a lot more efficient as well, and work in a way that we need for the future as well. For financial services, I think we already see the impact, and I think it could be even greater. Just to take an example of getting a card. I can open with my digital identity, I can open an account. I can prove my identity to the level of anti-money laundering requirements, that customer due diligence. I can prove that, I don't have sanctions against me. I'm not a politically exposed person, all these things. I can get the banking app, the mobile app all set up and provisioned, again, authenticating with a digital identity. I can get a card issued, all virtual. I can put it in my favorite payment wallet, and I can have a passkey as an authenticator as well to be able to easily authenticate these transactions on that particular card. And then I provision the card to my wallet, and I make a payment. That's possible, already done in markets with mature identity schemes, in the space of seconds and not weeks. And imagine that kind of transformation in terms of speed and efficiency beyond financial services or beyond a few mature market of identity as well. So I think there's a lot of value and societal benefits by really enabling a digital identity which is seamless, giving that secure access to services such as healthcare and financial services. And I think that's just two examples. And there's many more complicated ones, like buying property, for instance, or putting in a bid on a property, and buying and selling a car, renting a car, electric scooter. I mean, the use cases are, many. Anything that's digital, basically.
Yes, I know my journey here. People have heard me tell. If you've heard me speak before, you might know this story. But one of the great examples I have for how digital identity can be used, in a seamless way, was when I purchased my first car in Estonia. It was a private sale. I met the owner in a car park. I looked at the car. Yes, I wanted to buy it. I pulled out my phone. He pulled out his phone. I transferred the money to him. I authenticated into my bank. I signed the transaction. He got the money. Whilst that was happening, he was logging into the government services to then assign the ownership of the car to me. He signed that on his phone. I then opened up an insurance policy, signed that, jumped in my car and drove away, and the whole thing took less than 5 minutes. And the little Australian inside me was like, why can't the rest of the world have these things? And it's great to see that this is happening now. It's happening for a lot of countries. I have a follow-up question to this, perhaps for Rio. What do you think some of the main obstacles that must be overcome when creating a digital identity program?
Yes, the main obstacles are that, as already it was, I think one of the questions in the chat was mentioning it as well, that there must be a way to not let the synthetic identities into the play. So the verification of the users and the onboarding is a crucial building block. So whether it can be in the both physical way to prove the user and also the way to later prove the ownership of the wallet for any transactions. So these are the two key constraints. And then it becomes all to the trust, because even if there is a really good viable, cryptographically correct implementation, but it's really, really cumbersome to use, then it cannot be trusted because the wider public, they are not trusting mathematics, but they are trusting the way it makes the life less complicated. Because following up to what Mike was saying about Estonia, me personally, we have had it for 25 years. There is a whole generation of growing up using digital identity and never thinking about trust, because this is part of their lives. So if we can have the same kind of trust with the new wallet solutions, then this would be a really, really good problem out of the way. And of course, we have some issues within the eIDAS, and there are probably some difficulties of using the very privacy-oriented wallet in the context of the financial transactions. So these are the additional issues that may become, because on the other hand, we want wallet to be very privacy oriented, but on the other hand, in the financial world, we want the opposite of privacy.
Yes, there's definitely some things to reconcile there. I know, like in my journey and speaking with other governments and stakeholders in identity, use cases like we've just been talking about, as one of the main building blocks, resolving some of the issues that you were just raising, Enrio. But in regards to the use cases, I always telling governments, make sure they're there. The technology is one part. The issuing the identities is one part. But if the value isn't perceived by the end user, i.e., meaningful use cases for them, then perhaps it's not going to be the uptake and acceptance won't be there. I know from what I've seen in Estonia and the statistics that I see, just how prevalent banking and finance is in terms of the day-to-day use. So off the top of my head, I think it's around 80 to 90%, depending on who you ask. And I'm definitely interested to see what use cases come from the wallet topic. This really opens up a lot more possibilities. I know from what we've been working on and some developments with our dear partners at iProve, I wanted to ask Campbell a question about biometrics, and why are biometrics such an important aspect of digital identity programs?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think it relates also to some of the comments that Rio's talked about earlier as well, which is the last part. It's about the security and the assurance that you can have in knowing that the image that's presented in front of the screen during that remote onboarding experience is actually a real person, that they are actually there, and that they are the same as the person on the image and the authoritative identity source. Biometrics is uniquely placed to make an accurate determination that person is a genuine person, that they are a live person. And I think as we see more increasingly sophisticated injection attacks, including deep fakes, it becomes very, very difficult for a human to make the determination that actually the image being presented to them is that of a real person as opposed to that of a fake image. And I think the human can make those determinations at the moment, just about, but the ongoing training requirements, the deployment costs, the operational challenges, the environmental conditions that you have to put in place to support a human making those determinations. If we're looking at something of the scale of the EU wallets, the sheer number of humans that you would need at the skill levels that you would require, with the training costs, the environmental requirements and so on, it would be astronomical. Biometrics is the much less expensive, increasingly accurate, increasingly sophisticated, and increasingly superior to humans in determining and identifying the latest, most current sort of attempts of injection attacks and deepfakes. So it's the simplest thing to have. It's the easiest to have. It's the most pragmatic solution that we have going forward in terms of on a cost basis, an operational requirements basis, and a security and assurance basis. But also convenience. You know, biometrics is available for enrollment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's very difficult to put humans in that place.
Absolutely. I often look at some of these countries and their journeys and think, how are they going to enroll 100 million people, 220 million people? And I don't think it's any secret to you or I that biometric has to play a significant role in being able to onboard people. And again, you know, we sort of touched a little bit previously about uptake and acceptance, getting people to physically go down to an enrollment centre. This is another limiting factor. I quite like too what's happening with authentication and seeing the use of biometrics in signing. Yeah, very, very interesting. There's some emerging stuff in that field that I'm keeping my eye on. I'm interested to see what iProve does next in the biometric space. But speaking of emerging technologies, Rio, what role do emerging technologies play in facilitating user-centric digital identity?
In a many sense, these are the same things that I mentioned earlier. That the underlying trust mechanism is one thing, but there are the challenges which I mentioned regarding the secure user binding of the wallet, of the mobile phone. So there are very important forces to play, and how it will actually play out, we will see probably in coming years. But one thing that I would like to, you know, argue against is that probably the AI is not playing as big role as some people would guess, and also it has been shown that the blockchain is not a golden key to really anything. So there are quite a lot of technologies just emerging, but there are probably other technologies that are going to be phased out from the digital identity playground. But it sounds controversial, but some of the really hot topics in last 10 years, they will probably not be as hot topics in the digital identity in the future.
What about the role of the attribute attestations that we're seeing
Yes.
as part of the wallets?
Yes,
and the
exactly. Exactly. This is a good place to be right now, because attribute attestation, it's just a fancy word for the digital document, or presenting a digital document. It is just a fine, trusted, verifiable, interoperable way to present a proof of something. So it's a very quickly developing world with especially authentication, and because one might argue that the verifiable credentials have solved the issue already 10 years ago, but in reality, it's not the case. It's a very, very isolated territory. So with the current developments, and I'm glad that within the eIDAS large-scale pilots, those attributes and attestations are being developed into the actual usable scenarios. Because and I think this is the biggest takeaway, that many things that kind of existed before can actually make a rebirth in the real use cases.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I'm quite excited about with the wallets is, you know, from day one there has really been this focus on privacy. You know, and the users' data, etc. I have to really commend the EU on that approach. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the sensitivities around privacy issues in digital identity, and I think this is something that you really got right. But in some of these digital identity programs, there is, you know, the potential shortcomings of the eKYC processes. Marie, do you have any insights there?
Yeah, in terms of the eKYC processes for, you know, say for account opening, for instance, I mean, there are specific requirements there that so far has been domestic largely. That's now trying to be harmonized across the EU. And then they have the question of, will the EU ID wallet be able to satisfy these requirements? And there, more work is to be done, basically. I mean, the basic digital identity doesn't, for instance, include your address. So you need to have a different source of that also can be of sufficient levels of assurance that it can be trusted, because that's a requirement from an AML perspective. You have PEP and sanctions as well. So, but that's where the wallet needs to adapt to industry specific and industry specific legal requirements as well. And I think that's the large scale pilots would help us to understand what these needs are. And then they'll be up to the legislators and regulators to make sure that that equivalence is being, you know, provided for, and that we can find solutions as well, such as how do you get the address into the wallet as a verifiable credential that can be trusted.
Absolutely. There's actually a question for you, Marie. I'm not sure if you can answer it. I'm sure you would be able to, but if you can or not might be a different story. But what role will Visa play within the European Union digital identity wallet when it comes into existence? Well, sorry, when it comes to existing and new payment rails?
I can give a brief answer, and then of course, as I keep saying, when it comes to the EU ID wallet, there's a lot of work ahead of us. It's an exciting topic, but it's complex and there's a lot of work. As mentioned, we are part of the large-scale pilots for exactly that purpose, to understand what role we can play, but importantly, what is the impact of the EU ID wallet on existing and also future payment infrastructure. We see from the eIDAS regulation that there's expectations about the wallet will be used for strong user authentication. Sometimes you talk about strong customer authentication, payment initiation. You know, these terms are being mentioned in the recitals. And in general, when you talk about the wallet as well, it's expected that it will have a role to play when it comes to payment transactions. Of course, as Visa, we do card payments. We also do open banking through Tink. So for us to be able to understand how the wallet can be used to improve payment services, whether that is the user experience, the authentication flow, the regulatory compliance, reduce fraud, reduce abandonment, these industry KPIs, it is important to us. So we have to make sure at the very basic level, we at least have to make sure that existing payment rails are able to handle EU ID wallet in a good way that benefits everybody. So we are here to learn, and I think there's a lot more, and to make sure that the wallet is interoperable with existing infrastructure. So yeah, there's a lot more to come on this one as we are, learning together as part of these large-scale pilots.
Couldn't agree more. I've been watching definitely the payment use case side of things quite closely myself. Let's see, there's definitely a few things that need to be reconciled, I think, between the wallet and payment world. But there's some very clever people, and I'm sure we will be able to get there. We have a question here from Ian Norton. Attribute attestation. Who validates the attributes, the organization proving identity, or the authoritative source that masters and provided the attributes that are used to prove identity? This might be a question for you, Rio.
Yes, thank you. I think I can answer only in eIDAS context or EU context because in the eIDAS there is a clear attribution that I think it was Annex 6 when there was a list of authorized sources that had to be named by the member states that this is the authoritative source to tell information about whether population, the address, the education, and or driving license. So there is a whole list of attributes that can be provided only from this restricted list of authoritative source. So this is something that is kind of covered in eIDAS, but it doesn't solve anything outside the EU, because I imagine that it would be increasingly difficult to force something like this in the third countries. So this is the problem to be solved, and I believe that this is the problem to be solved by the regulators and special legislative side. Maybe Campbell can comment how it would look in UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating question. It's a really interesting challenge. But I mean, we're also seeing organisations like Citizen Pass in the UK that have developed to support people that don't have a photo ID, essentially create an accepted authoritative photo ID, and they use a sort of a vouching system whereby the individual is supported, the individual's claim to their identity is supported by whether it's an employer, a university lecturer, a school teacher, a doctor, etc. There's a list of sort of prescribed professions that can be considered sufficiently trustworthy to provide that sort of vouching. And then the people can access it. But I agree, I mean, it is a challenge. It's also a challenge in some of the developing countries where perhaps there isn't a national infrastructure with authoritative identity sources. So there's a lot of test and learn around different ways in which we can bring together the attributes that create that identity in a way that can itself then be subsequently trusted for use. So there is, I mean, eIDAS, as you say, eIDAS has a specific list. Whereas the UK has a slightly different model, but I think we'll see lots of test and learn in different countries, particularly in those nations where they don't have a clear structure of authoritative identity, where your birth certificates aren't necessarily robust and widespread. Passport ownership isn't widespread, etc. So I think we will see that sort of test and learn to find ways. But the legislation becomes very important, because the legislation will provide underpinning for the trust in those sources. Whether, for example, in the UK, the vouching scheme is underpinned by fraud legislation. Because if an identity is acquired as a result of a fraudulent vouching, for example, that is prosecutable in law, and so we will see different legislative solutions, I think, coming up with this as digital identity becomes more accepted and becomes more the norm, and there is a greater demand for its use. We're going to have to find solutions to actually populate the wallet with credentials and attributes that can be verified and trusted.
I think we have time for one more question from an anonymous attendee. How are AML/CTF entities meeting their requirements with digital ID in the EU and Estonia? Are the details of the documents used to create the digital ID being transmitted via the digital ID platform? Riho, I think this might be one for you. They've mentioned Estonia here.
They mentioned Estonia, yes. So I think the short answer is yes and no, but mostly no. The digital identity or electronic identity in Estonia, we have the governmental guarantee that this is this person, but there is no connection for any documents or any attributes of this person, which means that for the AML and CTF purposes, this information has to be retrieved through a additional channel. Whether this channel can be facilitated, let's say there is a document that is digitally signed using the same ID, then it's kind of there, but generally these additional documents are not part of the current digital ID in Estonia, which means that we have a lot to improve on.
Absolutely. Okay. I think we are coming to the end of our time today, and it's definitely a great discussion. And thank you very much to our esteemed panelists. Thank you to the viewers for joining us, and I trust you got as much out of this as I did. And a big thank you to iProve for enabling this informative webinar, and thanks for watching. I'm Michael Buckland. Forward to the future.